You are listening to the Doinkers podcast with Willie J and Nick Meyer. This is the second half of our NFC West, NFC North deep dive. If you didn't hear the NFC West deep dive, sorry for the dramatic pause, but I wanted to wait for the music to finish. If you didn't see the NFC West deep dive, thank you for joining us first off. And second off, you can check it out on the same channel here. If you're watching live and you've stuck with us or you watched this whole video live, that's crazy. Good for you. I appreciate you. We really appreciate you. So here we are. We're going to talk about NFC North. We've already went through some news in the NFC West podcast. The same news. This is all the same night. So, Willie, you are my NFC North expert, and there's like hatred and love and all of these things formed within that. So I am going to let Willie take the wheel and start leading me through the NFC North here.
Yes.
Because I couldn't ask for a better guide. So Willie, what's going on with the NFC North?
Yeah, NFC North is like, it's like a big family. You got a mix of, family you love, and it's like if you had a family with just like one family member that you absolutely hate. It's kind of what it's like. Absolutely hate, and that would be the Packers. But
see, I feel like with the AFC West, it's kind of the same, except the Raiders are the one that everyone hates. So that I kind of just hate all the rest of them, except for the Chargers. They're kind of adorable.
Yeah, I like the Chargers. Yeah, I mean, the Raiders are the black sheep. I mean, because they're black colors, so that helps. But yeah. Now the NFC North, I need to pull up my stats on my other computer here, but the NFC North was, we talked about how good the NFC West was last year, minus the Cardinals, but the NFC North, every single team had a winning record, and the NFC North was legitimately a pretty great division last year. Obviously the Bears won, but there were some woes of the Vikings and their quarterback issues, and the Lions regressing in some ways without Ben Johnson and other factors. But every team was pretty good last year, and I think we'll probably see a repeat of that this year. I'm going to start off with the Chicago Bears, my Chicago Bears.
Bears.
The Bears. I guess I could just do a quick segue into, we talked about this, the Hammond Bears. I would be very upset if they leave the city of Chicago. I want to go on record as saying that. I'm not the greatest person to ask about my feelings on it, simply because I've spent a lot of time in Chicago and the Midwest. I did not grow up there. I've been there when I was a kid. I went there almost every year, and I've been there many, 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 many times. A lot of my memories are in Indiana, and also specifically Hammond. So I don't like it for the culture. I don't like it for the team, but the Indiana Bears is not as offensive to me as most Bears fans you ask, because I also have a lot of emotional attachment to Indiana and the region where the Bears will be playing. So I hate it. I don't like it, but I'm not as passionately against it. I am for capitalistic reasons, et cetera, but
yeah,
if that Hammond and that surrounding area is still very personal to me, so and it's not going to affect my fandom.
No, this is fair. Like I'm a Raiders fan. Like they moved a lot of times, right? And they had historically a very serious issue with the city of Oakland, right? And I think Oakland ultimately made the right choice. But here's my little soapbox, especially because my family, 49ers fans, they went through this when the 49ers moved from Candlestick all the way out to whatever other Silicon Valley city they moved to, Santa Clara, I think, kind of in the middle of nowhere, just next to an Apple gigantic mega corporation. Anyway, neither here nor there. We have to figure out a way to use the same site. Why would you want to move off of it's Lake Michigan, am I right? That's the lake that it's on currently. It is such a beautiful spot where Soldier Field is, and it's the perfect spot for Chicago, for the city. Everything is right there. I know that it costs more, but we have to stop letting billionaire owners get away with the excuse that it costs too much.
Exactly, and they're cutting costs for personal gain. It has nothing to do, because they have the money and the fandom to support an expensive stadium. So like it's purely just based on greed. There really is no nuance there.
Like go and play at one of the college stadiums for a little bit. I know that's a downgrade. That sucks. renovate Soldier Field or tear it down and build a new one. Who cares?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
spend that money, do it, and then you've got a beautiful location with a beautiful new stadium. Stop building these gigantic buildings that are only going to be abandoned 20 years later.
It's just not efficient. And I mean, there is so many memories attached to Soldier Field. And I recently came across a picture of my grandpa at Soldier Field in the bleachers in 1953. So I have a lot of personal family memories there too. But I think the nostalgia and the culture is built into the spot on the lake. It's not the stadium. The stadium does need to be renovated. It does need to be upgraded, absolutely. But taking the Bears out of Chicago just it's just not right.
It's
And
gross, man. I mean, I get what you're saying too. Like, again, I'm a Raiders fan, like, and we ditched Oakland for much the same reason because we couldn't tear down our building.
yeah,
We had the A's to blame, but it's the same stuff.
it's
Come
yeah,
on.
it sucks. I mean, my only devil's advocate here, and this is kind of gross as a Chicago fan, but I will say, you get in Chicago, you hop on the L, take a 30-minute max ride on the L to Hammond. The Hammond train station is a little sketchy, but it's no different than anywhere else in Chicago. I've been there several times. And then the site in Hammond, it's not too far out of the city. It's not like moving from Oakland to Vegas at all. It's not even like really quite. I mean, maybe it's akin to like the Giants in New Jersey, or I mean, with traffic, the Niners to Candlestick Park. Like if you're driving, you're going to be able to get on the L. You're going to be able to get out of the city faster to Hammond than you will with a lot of other locations. So it's still close to the city. It's still very much a suburb of Chicago. The culture is not the same. It's Indiana, but it's not like they're going all the way out to Gary or like God forbid South Bend or something. Like it's still close
I
enough to the city where it's not huge diversion, but it's still not Chicago.
and I know you're exactly right. It's so hard for me, man. Like, dude, you can't lose these iconic locations, right? The location means so much. It's not just the city. It's that prime spot on the lake, like right next to all those museums that Chicago has to
Yeah,
offer, where you can walk and see all those things. Now instead, you're like, hey, let's go out to Hammond and let's make a trip of it. And I keep comparing it, but the Levi Stadium is almost the exact same thing to me. You moved a stadium out of San Francisco on a beautiful spot where you could go and have a nice time, and you moved it into Santa Clara, where it's like, yeah, you can go there, but then you have to go and like eat at McDonald's for the rest of the week because that's the only thing around there. Like, come on, come
it's not.
on.
It's not. And you can. I mean, look, you can even compare it. I haven't been to a whole lot of major sports games, but I have been to. Now it's slipping my mind, but I've seen the San Francisco Giants play in person in the city, and it's so much different. I've even been out to near Levi Stadium to see a concert out in Santa Clara, so I know the difference in terms of like being in the city, being out of the city, and Santa Clara is not San Francisco. Like that, the feel of being in the city at the Giant Stadium was just like you really feel like you're in San Francisco.
Hmm.
And as much as the Bears could make upgrades, it's not going to feel like Chicago. It could still feel like the Bears, but it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I'm soapboxing here for a completely non-fantasy reason. I just think that like the billionaires shouldn't be able to get away with like removing this from the city after all these years, just because they want to get public funding or save some money. The billionaires have made that money off the back of the citizens of Chicago,
It's the
and the
reason they own
citizens
the
of
team. Yeah,
Chicago should have a say in this. Anyway,
yeah,
that's my soapbox. Go on, Willie, with the fantasy stuff.
yeah. But I mean, and it sucks that we're having this great year from the Bears and then a possible move. But I think the makeup of the team has had some changes, but I don't see a whole lot of offensive regression coming into this fantasy year. I mean, a lot of the back of his team, the offensive success was built on the back of young players. And it's funny, we were talking going into the year last year with the run game maybe being the weak link and not getting excited about Swift or Monongai. But the Bears finished third in rushing and passing 12th, and points overall is ninth. So they finished above average in every category, or elite in terms of the run game. And that was without Caleb Williams going off as a runner, which I had predicted going into the year. He still had a great fantasy season, but he only had 3 rushing touchdowns, so that did not come to fruition. But the run game itself was excellent. Um, so we have Ben Johnson coming back for year 2. We have Deacon Doyle, who was the OC last year. I don't really know what he did, but he's the Ravens OC now, so he must have done something because that's a pretty big promotion. Not promotion, but when you're under Ben Johnson, that's a big promotion because the Ravens have a defensive-minded head coach in Jesse Minter. So they're relying on Ben Johnson's disciple to carry their offense. We'll talk about how that works going forward. But they did promote Press Taylor. Now, Press Taylor was the OC in Jacksonville during the Doug Peterson administration, and that had a lot of ups and downs. So there's some caution there, but Ben Johnson is still the mind here, and Press Taylor was the passing game coordinator last year, so he already has that chemistry with Caleb and the whole receiving core. So I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, Press Taylor's gotten some like he might be like Nathaniel Hackett light as far as press talks about him.
Yeah.
You just hope that Ben Johnson has such a commanding presence of the offensive coordinator is like in name only.
I think so too, and that's what shocked me about the Doyle hire for the Ravens is that it feels weird, but at the same time, like Ben Johnson, I think is the commander of the play calling here, and Press Taylor, he delivered as passing game coordinator last year, so I'm not complaining. Of course, Dennis Allen returns. He had his time on the Raiders, but he also had 7 or 8 elite seasons as a defensive coordinator for the Saints. They weren't elite the whole time he was there, but he definitely had a good defense at times and stuck around. So, and he got a lot out of his secondary last year. I will mention first the notable losses. The most significant one, I guess we'll start with the defense, is that they did lose most of their secondary. They drafted a rookie out of Oregon, Dylan Thieneman, in the first round. Love the pick. I thought he would go higher in the draft, so exceptional value. Really like him. But they did lose, C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They lost the interception leader in Kevin Byard. They lost Jaquan Brisker. I think I'm forgetting names. And they only really replaced them with Dylan Thieneman and Kobe Bryant from the Seahawks, which are both fantastic upgrades. Don't get me wrong, but they still lost a lot of pieces. And the reason the Bears had so much success last year in close games is partly Caleb, partly the run game, but very significantly the turnovers, and that's not going to repeat even close to what it was last year, I don't think. So in order to mitigate that defensive loss, we need the offense to get even better, which I think it could. However, we did lose center Drew Dalman to retirement, but we drafted the first center off the board in the draft. He's out of Iowa. That's all I need to hear. And they did lose DJ Moore, but as good as DJ Moore had games last year, I mean, he was kind of an afterthought at times, and they have enough young receiving options, that it doesn't affect the overall passing yards for me, or that prediction. So
it was a great trade for the team, regardless. I mean, he was the odd man out too many times, and also great trade for the Bills. It was just a win trade all the way around.
I think the Bears maybe came out ahead, at least so far, just because a second-round pick for a 30-something receiver who's not been a number one in a couple of years is damn good value. Like, I like it a lot, and because of a DJ Moore trade, we were able to get, the starting center of the future and some other players like Sam Roosh. So, love the trade. So all that to say, not a lot of volatility otherwise. Caleb's back, Tyson Bagent's backing him up. We got DeAndre Swift, Kyle Monungai. They got it done last year, and they did not draft or sign any free agent running backs, so they're running with them again.
That's probably the biggest question mark I have. This is the one team where I'm like, Tyler Algier, what happened to you, man? This was it.
Yeah, that would have been a running back by committee up the wazoo. Like, that would have been nuts if they had actually brought in someone of Algier's talent.
They have to love Monongai, is all I can say.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that it's hard to predict them to repeat what they did last year, but Swift and Monongai, I think we'll talk about their ADP in a second, but I see them at least coming close to what they did last year. And similar to the Williams-Corum conversation, again, not predicting injuries, but like if one goes down and they don't have anybody else, like Kyle Monungai, like getting 20 carries a game and getting 2 touchdowns a game, it's a pipe dream for sure. But like the amount they use the run game, that's something to look at. And then wide receivers, of course, they lost DJ Moore, but Romadunze, Luther Burden, of course, Colston Loveland, tight end. They're the big three. We'll talk about them in a second. And then they did add Khalif Raymond to replace Zacchaeus. and they drafted Xavier Thomas in the third round, which was a huge overreach in my opinion. But they seem to fancy him as a bit of a Rashid Shaheed type returnman. He's very, very, very fast. I think he was the fastest 40 time in the combine, if not up there. So I think they have a clear role in mind for him at least, but not super fantasy relevant. So I do want to talk about the quarterback and some things that happened in the offseason that I'm excited about that some people are negative on. But I do want to start with a question for you. So we'll talk about the ADP nuance here, but just off the rip, not considering that, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, who do you think produces the best this year?
Um, Relative to position, I could see Colson Loveland being a home run. Not relative to position, just in general. I'm going to go against the grain here and say that I could see an Odunze revival. I feel pretty not confident, but I like Odunze this year. I think he's getting a little bit left behind by the excitement of Burden.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, we just forget how good Odunze was prior to the heel injury last year.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, a top 10 receiver, if not top five, the first half of the season. And then, of course, he had the injury. He came back kind of slow. And by that point, that was when Loveland had really broken out. So Odunze didn't have to produce or get involved as much. And I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. But with ADP, Odunze is going around wide receiver 29. And Burden is going around wide receiver, just saw on here. He's going around wide receiver 21. So eight full spots higher than Odunze.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't make sense of this.
It is 100% in my mind the hype right now. We saw Burden have some great games near the end of last season, but also the training camp hype right now is hyping him up as like, oh, he's a clear number one, he's alpha, he's et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what is always failed to talk about is like, what is Odunze actually doing? Like, Burden can look great and Odunze can look great. They can both be good, and I just. Yeah. In general, when I have this kind of like, I don't want to call it murky because I'm excited about both of them. I think I'd be happy with both of them. It's not murky in the way that I don't know which one to take. It's murky in that you could take any of them.
Yeah, I agree.
I like to take the guy who's going later.
Exactly. And I think that as the season goes on and we see maybe more Odunze camp highlights, we'll find that they're going around the same position. Odunze will raise, Burden will fall. And when it comes to that question, I still like Odunze because of, obviously where he was drafted. I don't discount Burden's talent at all, but I think that Odunze is a little more established on his team. Obviously, he's a year older. And I think that Odunze just has a safer floor overall. And I think that the only caveat here is that in terms of type of receiver, Burden and DJ Moore, are much more one-to-one comparison than Odunze and DJ Moore. So if you look at, Luther Burden is purely a DJ Moore replacement, that's a reason to get excited. But I think that regardless, like we saw this offense function, without DJ Moore having to be a big factor. So having that big body receiver is a very important piece of the offense, but it doesn't automatically translate to a number one for me. And I think that Loveland is, again, ADP notwithstanding, I think Loveland is the guy here as the number one.
I would be very excited about Loveland. I think ADP withstanding, Loveland scares me a little bit. Kind of jumping ahead of all this, like ADP withstanding, there's one screaming value on this team for me, and it is Monangai. He's going so much later than everyone else because every single other player on this team is kind of like just they're all mushed together into this late fourth, early fifth round. You can kind of throw a dart and you're getting one of them there, which is weird. But then Monangai's going all the way in the eighth round. Roughly.
Yeah.
And that's crazy to me. Like, please give me that.
Just based on value alone, I mean, maybe you diminish a bit of the upside. With Swift, they're stealing a lot of touches or, sharing touches. But, I mean, like, similar to the Blake Corum logic I mentioned before, like, I think that someone who had Monangai as his flex in a lot of games last year, he's a year older. The offensive line had some volatility with Drew Dalman's retirement, but really not at all. I mean, they had the best offensive lineman in the league last year. I mean, protector of the year, Joe Thuney. They have two great tackles. I mean, the left tackle position's a little wonky now, but they have great depth. and Darnell Wright's a superstar. So I don't see the run game changing much this year. And if you get Monungai, like you said, in the eighth, ninth round, and he's your maybe not consistent flex, but like a solid flex, like that's really good value. And I'm not exactly sure where Swift is going, but I
I
would
think he's also
imagine
that late fourth, early fifth. He's just they're all modge podged around like 50.
it's funny. Monungai and Corum are going the exact same spot, and then Swift is going quite a bit higher. He's going 40 spots higher than Monungai right now, which is crazy.
I don't
I
think you can justify that.
no,
Yeah,
and it's not a knock to Swift, but I think that the talent gap between, again, comparison, Williams and Corum is a bit more close. Or I would say that Williams Corum is a bit. I don't know where I'm going with this, but basically, I think that Williams you can justify taking higher than Swift at this point, and he is going higher. But like the talent gap between Swift and Monungai is not 40 spots at all.
No, for me, it's like with Kyron Williams. If you're looking at that comparison, I think he's more likely to score more touchdowns.
Yeah,
With the Bears, I don't know who's more likely to score more touchdowns. I'd honestly put the money on Monongai, right? And when you're splitting hairs like this, touchdowns are a great way to try to kind of weed through. And you can't always prognosticate touchdowns, except for at the running back position. It feels like you can check and say, hey, this is going to be the guy who's going to get the harder yards. Um,
yeah,
you look at Ben Johnson, right? And which one's Gibbs? Which one's Monty from the past, right? It's pretty clear in this case. Monongai is going to be the guy who's going to grind out hard yards. I think he's going to be the dude who is likely to get the touchdowns. And I just think value wise, he's a screaming value compared to everyone else.
I agree, and I think that like he's not quite at the level of David Montgomery yet, but I think he has that potential. And if Monungai is that knuckles role that Montgomery was a couple years ago, Montgomery was going in the fifth round. If you can get, Monungai a few rounds later and hope for maybe quite possibly that level of return, especially because Swift is not Gibbs, so there's going to be even more of a shared backfield, in my opinion. I think that's great value, and I think Swift could absolutely produce, but where he's going around the range of like Bucky Irving and other guys that are the clear, maybe not Bucky's not the best example, but other guys that are more clear of a one. I don't like Swift's value this year.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I agree. I think that the Burden and Odunze, I think they're just ADP to monitor. I don't like Burden's ADP at all around ahead of Mike Williams or around that range now. So I would definitely fade him a couple rounds at least. But I think that both of them are going to produce. And I think Loveland is kind of similar to the McBride argument, is just kind of how much do you like tight ends? Because Loveland has not shown that he's McBride level yet, but he's going a little bit later than McBride. And I think that just the amount of volume he's going to get is going to justify him having a high tight end finish. So all three of those guys, I would just monitor their ADP, but they're all worth dart throws.
Yeah, I think with Burden, the thing that we're seeing is just kind of the recency bias of this team. Once Odunze got hurt, Burden looked great, right? But we didn't really see them both like super duper healthy together. And
Yeah.
with Loveland, I also agree. For me, it's like that round like 3 to 7 where I really don't personally want to take a tight end. This is the only reason I'm down on Loveland, is because it just feels like you are sacrificing such potential upside. But otherwise, I love Loveland as a player. I just hate where he's landing.
Yeah, I agree. And this is just, it's hard because we did see them produce so much last year, but there is a lot of mouths to feed. And you are a run first team, at least if you're repeating what you did last year. So if you have 3 wide receiver ones and you're leaning on your run game by committee, like there's going to be some disappearing games here. And again, tight ends have a lot of disappearing games. So I see that when you're drafting a tight end to start, like that boomer bust doesn't matter as much for the position because there's a lot of bust. But it'll be interesting to see if one clear alpha does emerge as like the runaway league winner. And I just think on how they spread around targets, I don't see that happening, but there still is value.
Agreed. I think that probably what this all leads to is the fact that Caleb Williams, as a fantasy quarterback, he didn't exactly like provide what you would hope for last year.
He didn't, but if you look at his games in the second half, it was really the tale of two halves maybe not halves, like thirds for the Bears. And Caleb really didn't break out until the latter half of the year. He's going around now. Looks like QB6, and I absolutely think he could finish around that range. Everything is there for him. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but he's going around the range of Jalen Hurts and Drake May. And I think if you're going to spend the draft capital on a high end quarterback, I would take one that has more consistent floor. I think that, Williams, as great as things really could be, and I think they will, if you're going to go high end QB, like there's a range where there's like the top QBs, like, I mean, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, maybe not Lamar this year, but there's that range. And then there's that middle tier range, which is where Caleb is, Drake May. And then there's the Brock Purdy's and the Dax and the Matt Staffords. And personally, I would rather build my team around that later QB, like the Purdy or the Dak. I just think that similar to Loveland, it's really the same argument with Williams, where it's not as premium of a position, quarterback and tight end, because of the one roster spot, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that if you're feeling like you're wanting to spend on a tight end or feeling like you want to spend on a quarterback, I think there's worse options to pick. But it's really just a personal draft strategy for me.
I have a hard time disagreeing with that. The one thing I will say with Caleb is that there is, to me, an argument to be made about his level of confidence this year compared to his last year, because he's had those, I mean, just highlight reel, amazing. It's hard to describe it in real words, because his throws that just look like they shouldn't work and then they do.
You can't really compare it.
No, and they're amazing. They're awesome, and like he's getting the accolades for that. So the confidence level is boosting, and what I love to see from a quarterback is boosted confidence, because that's going to make his whole entire game just a little bit better in general. So I could make an argument here that if you wanted to see someone on the upside, even as a high-end quarterback, someone who could elevate to a top 3 position, I like Caleb for that reason. But that is a little bit like, these are my crystals and I'm prognosticating energy and vibes. I like to play that way, but it's hard for me to tell anyone else to do that.
It's hard because he really is in that middle tier where he's not like that safe 100% locked in bet like a Josh Allen, but he's also like going a lot higher than a very safe bet like Brock Purdy that maybe doesn't have that prognosticated boom. So it's hard. I guess all that to say, like, I like Williams more than the other boom potential quarterbacks around this range, even Drake May, which it's probably some personal bias there, but like I just see the Williams having that leap. Obviously May had that last year. I see Williams having, I think Williams is more likely to have a super big top 3 finish leap than we see May repeat as QB2. Could be wrong, but that's my own personal take. But again, so it really just depends on how you build your team, I suppose. And I do want to mention, just to wrap up real quick, the Madden curse, quote unquote, with Caleb Williams on the Madden cover. A lot of people hated it because he wasn't the best quarterback in the league. But with Madden, it's a franchise and you want to make money, and he comes from a big market and he's a young player. So it makes a lot of sense that he's on the cover. I'm excited about it. I do want to rant about the Madden curse. I know that it exists. Obviously, we saw even last year, Saquon had regression. CMC is a great example of the Madden curse. With quarterbacks, though, we don't really see it as often. Again, like Lamar was on the cover after his MVP season, and then he was hurt. He missed some games the following year, but like he didn't fall apart. He still had a great season. They made it to the divisional round. Mahomes had an incredible season after he was on the Madden cover. I think looking like 8-9 years ago, like Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, they both were on the Madden cover. They had incredible seasons the next year. Like I think that the Madden curse when it comes to quarterbacks isn't as prevalent. So I'm not worried. If Madden put like Loveland on the cover for whatever reason, I would maybe be a little bit worried. But I don't. The Madden curse in quarterbacks, it's not a 1-to-1 comparison.
You say they come from a large market, but last time I heard Hammond, Indiana was a pretty small market.
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of people. There's too many people.
I would be surprised, actually. You're probably right. If you're drafting based on the Madden curse, more power to you.
Yeah. Again,
you already know what you're gonna do.
Yeah, there's legitimate things like we've seen. Again, it's not real, but like it makes sense that the person on the Madden cover historically, that's a skill position player, is not going to replicate what they did the year before. Like that just doesn't happen. So that's baked into that Madden curse theory. But um, also, I guess I do want to say like Caleb Williams also gets a lot of hate because he's confident, but he had this great 30-minute interview with Chris Sims. And again, bias aside, like he just came across as extremely down to earth and humble and like articulate. And it was just a really, really great interview. So if you like sports interviews and you maybe want to see a side of Caleb Williams that isn't as this confident, cocky player that the media shows him as, like really, really great interview. I was really surprised just at the quality of it, not just him because I love Caleb Williams, but like the quality of the interview with Chris Sims was really good. So
I also just want to say, if you have faith that Ben Johnson really is the dude that he is claiming to be, going into year two, it's not going to get worse. It's going to get better. Um,
yeah,
and if the Lions are anything to take it by, year over year, they got better for a long while.
yeah,
And you want to be in on that, even if it costs a little bit to get in on it. So this is a team that, although most of the pieces are pricey, we talked about that. I am 100% okay with taking one of these dudes. Choose your favorite. My favorite's Odunze because he's a little cheaper.
yeah.
But if you're like Luther Burden is that dude, or Swift is that dude, or Loveland is that dude, don't be hesitant about it. Don't be super worried about it. This is an offense that someone almost certainly is going to score points.
I agree. I think like worst case scenario, and maybe this depending on the year you had him could look bad, but I think like worst case, these guys are going to end up like a Devonta Smith on your team, where they're going around the same range, great offense, has some pretty bad games, but also has some pretty great games, and I think you could do worse.
Yeah, yeah, agreed.
All right, let's roll through this here. We got the Green Bay Packers. So, Packers finished second last year, 9-7-1. They were 15th in rushing yards, 18th in passing yards, 16th overall in points. So pretty middle of the road. They made the playoffs in part because of the Micah Parsons trade, but also in part because of the defense. Now they are returning head coach Matt LaFleur. He just signed an extension, and their OC Adam Stevanik is coming back as well. Again, LaFleur's the guy here. They did lose their defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. He's the new coach of the Miami Dolphins. So there could be some regression there, but they did bring in Jonathan Gannon, who was the head coach of the Cardinals. Wasn't great, but he was the defensive coordinator of the Eagles for a couple incredible defensive seasons there. So I think I wouldn't quite call it an upgrade, but I wouldn't worry about the defense.
Jonathan Gannon's been pretty competent as a defensive coordinator. Like, forget the Cardinals. Just leave the Cardinals out of this. They suck so much it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, just think about him as the Eagles DC.
Yeah, exactly. So I like that. Micah Parsons, of course, the current injury timetable is looking like mid to late October, which isn't ideal for the defense. But I think the defense as a whole,
why does he not simply do whatever George Kittle's doing?
Because he's smart. No hate to Kittle, but I just feel like Parsons has a lot of guys in his ear that are like giving him the most succinct and just great medical advice. I feel like he takes it seriously, so he wants to be safe. So I'll start with the roster. There was quite a bit of departures this year, but we'll start with the current roster. Jordan Love is, of course, back. Tyrod Taylor, I didn't realize. I guess he's the backup now, replacing Malik Willis. Could do worse. Running backs, we have Josh Jacobs, maybe. Chris Brooks and Marshawn Lloyd.
So it's real ugly after Josh Jacobs. And so guess what we had to have this offseason is Josh Jacobs embroiled in pretty serious domestic violence charges. And nothing has come out about them, which might be good news for him. Who knows?
Pretty serious though, and regardless of whether or not they came out, like the running back room behind him is not good. And I think Emmanuel Wilson was their RB2 last year. He didn't see the field much, and he's gone. So this feels like a Najee Harris team. This feels like a James Conner trade team. Mm-hmm. So we'll monitor that. But
Tyler Algier, if you had waited a month, you could be signing a hefty contract to be playing in Wisconsin right now.
I mean, honestly, like Jacobs news obviously being a factor. Like if Algier was on this team, I would like him a lot. Fantasy for the Packers. The wide receiver room was a headache last year. There was a lot of mouths to feed. We didn't see a breakout, and this year maybe we will see a breakout. Perhaps, because they did lose Romeo Dubes to the Pats. They lost Dontavian Wicks to the Eagles. And they got a pretty clear three receiving options right now for wide receivers. Christian Watson, who just signed an extension, Jaden Reed, and Matthew Golden. And of course, they have Savion Williams and Sky Moore. But those are pretty clear three, and that at least alleviates some of the guessing work that I think we had last year with Dubes and Wicks in the mix, and because they didn't add any receivers in the draft or free agency. So they're rolling with Watson, Golden, and Reed, and of course they have Tucker Kraft coming off the ACL tear, but it was early-ish in the season. It was at least a month and a half before Parsons. So I think Kraft is on the up and up and will likely be there week one. So I guess I'll just ask. I mean, pretty obvious question here, and this is kind of a diet version of the Bears' big three. But with Watson, Reed, and Golden, is there a guy here that you think could actually break out and be that wide receiver one?
Um, it's gonna be Christian Watson for me, if any of them do. Uh, and it's weird because like he doesn't necessarily feel like he fits into that wide receiver one mold. However, the Packers clearly think he does, and they
Yeah,
keep trying to make it work. It hasn't necessarily worked yet, but I do think that with the kind of filtering of targets that's happening here now at this point, we could see him really pop off. But the person who I think really you want of this passing game, and it's been a little bit forgotten because of the ACL tears, Tucker Kraft. Tucker
absolutely.
Kraft was dominating, and there's no reason to think that he won't be the number one pass catcher again on this team because when they were operating like that, they were doing quite a bit better than when it stopped because he got hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was a really big. I mean, we talk about the Parsons injury, but the Kraft injury really did put a dent in this offense. And I was looking up his numbers from last year, and he didn't consistently blow you away as a receiving option. Yeah, I think some of his stats were inflated by two really big games, but he was putting up double digits every single week, and he was getting a lot of looks. And for the tight end position, you really could do worse than that. So I think he's going around tight end five now, which I like. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that there wasn't that kind of forgottenness of Kraft
Mm-hmm.
baked into his ADP. I think that he's going enough around like later than the McBrides, the Bowers, the Lovelands that I actually like him quite a bit for my tight end position this year.
Yeah, he's not exactly like the forgotten leftover at this point, but round eight is kind of that level where if you're getting a starter and someone who could potentially like elevate from where you're picking him, he could go from tight end five to tight end two easy. I mean, just based on his
Yeah,
usage last year, if he didn't get hurt, I think he would have been a shoe in for top three tight end.
I think he could have been going around where Loveland is for sure. Just because, like again, like he didn't have every game wasn't a huge blow up, but he was putting up double digits every single week, and he got the target share. And I mean, they lost Dubes and they lost Wicks, and they didn't replace them. So obviously, those targets are going to go to the wide receivers. But I think Kraft is probably going to be the biggest beneficiary from the vacated targets.
Yeah, I will say this about the pass catchers: Matthew Golden is being kind of just relegated to the double digit rounds. You could say there's a reason for it, but he is going to be a sophomore wide receiver this year. He didn't exactly have a wonderful rookie season, but I think that the dart throw of Matthew Golden isn't a bad choice. I think a dart throw of Matthew Golden might turn out to be a little bit better than you think, especially if there is a pecking order.
I agree, and I do, yeah. I just want to come back to the vacated targets because again, he did not have a great rookie year, but clearly they have faith in him because otherwise they would have signed someone in free agency or they would have drafted somebody. And again, he was drafted in the first round, so there's that flashy bias baked into him as a player. But I think that depending on where Watson goes ADP wise, I can see him steadily rising, and I might still like him as a pick. I think he really could produce this year. But I think that if Watson's ADP rises, I want to see Golden's rise as well because he just has that breakout potential, at least on paper. And I mean, Jaden Reed could be a solid dart throw option again, just because of the vacated targets. But unlike with Golden, we really know what we have of Reed, which is some really good games. But I would be shocked if he ends up as the wide receiver one on this team.
I don't like where Jaden Reed currently is, and that's like seventh round, eighth round, right around there. It doesn't
Wow.
feel like a dart throw that I want to make. It feels like way too big of a question mark on return of value. Whereas Matthew
Yeah.
Golden has enough upside on where he is. And if Christian Watson is the wide receiver one, Matthew Golden takes over as that possession guy underneath, we're in.
Yeah.
Awesome, love that. I but again, I'm going to be very clear about this right now. Tucker Craft. That's the guy who I
Yeah.
really want in this pass catching
Yeah.
back
He
core.
probably is like my early pick for my favorite tight end to draft this year. Um, Obviously he's higher than some other later round tight ends, but like if you're going in the eighth round and he's there, like that's just a slam dunk pick for me. Um, and I agree. I think Watson is someone to watch, but I do like Golden quite a bit this year. I just think that obviously his touchdowns are going to go up, and I think that like Dubes and Wicks were never like big enough receivers to talk about as being like inherently significant them leaving the team because they were never wide receiver one, but they had a lot of looks last year, a lot of targets, especially down the stretch with Kraft being out. So there's a lot of this is a pass heavy team, and if Jacobs misses any time at all, like it's only going to go up. And I can see Love like throwing the ball 40 times a game on a regular basis. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I do like much more than last year. I like a dart throw on one of these receivers, with Golden being my favorite.
Right. Well, and like with Romeo Dubs last year, he ended up being a kind of solid piece of your team in the second half. In particular, he actually had some steady production. So with him
Mm-hmm.
gone, they're going to want that. I just feel like Matthew Golden just slots in.
He,
He's got the best skill set to slot into that role. Whereas Christian
yeah,
Watson's going to blow up sometimes. Jaden Reed's going to blow up sometimes. Matthew Golden, I think, can be consistent.
yes, I like that. And like again, it could fluctuate, but his ADP is really nice right now in the double digit rounds, and that's he was drafted to be the wide receiver one. Like you can't really deny that. Regardless of how they feel about Watson as a player, and they clearly do like him. Like they took a receiver in the first round for the first time in 20 years. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's says something.
And never forget about your post hype sleepers, man. The post hype sleepers are so cool because they hit, and it just feels so good because you're like, everyone doubted this guy, and I said, no, we're back, and then it happens, and you just feel so good. And Matthew Golden's a guy who I could absolutely see being that dude this year.
Yeah, and last just to wrap up, I will say Jacobs, suspension notwithstanding, I don't see him being elite this year per se, but I think he's a solid RB2.
If
Yeah,
Jacobs ends up pushing off his legal case till next year, or like however it works, if it gets thrown out or whatever, if he ends up
yeah,
playing this whole season, um, if he's your RB2, you're in a good spot.
yeah, I agree. All right, Minnesota Vikings, slightly less heinous now. So the Vikings were an interesting team last year because if you were to tell me that like they finished with like 6 wins, they finished 9-8, but they really felt like a 6-win team just based on how bad the vibes were offensively.
That defense really really pulled some dead weight.
And really, like you can say that across the board because nobody stood out on this offense last year. Justin Jefferson had a terrible season relative to where he was taken. Jordan Addison, he just was kind of there. He didn't stand out. TJ Hawkinson fell off a cliff. The run game was non-existent. There was no offensive pieces on the Vikings last year that produced. Um, in fact, they were 23rd in rushing yards, which kind of surprisingly high for me. But 30th in passing yards and then 26th overall. So just abysmal.
Yeah, I think like shockingly, Aaron Jones did pretty well, but like Xavier Scott or whoever it was, one of their other running backs had random pop offs. Jordan
Pop
Mason
off.
didn't do anything. I can tell you that first off.
Yeah, he's back, but so is Kevin O'Connell for year 5. Brian Flores for year 4 signed a massive contract extension. Obviously, the big upgrade here. There's no losses to talk about because they lost Jalen Naylor, but they replaced him with Jawan Jennings, which I view as a pretty fair 1-to-1. Um, so they bring in Kyler Murray, and he's here to quote unquote compete with JJ McCarthy. Now, I will say
It,
it's not looking like a competition.
Well, it's funny because I've heard the opposite. I've heard that Kyler came in and he immediately threw 2 picks in the first OTAs practice. Like it's just interesting to me because I agree that it almost certainly has to be Kyler because from what I'm hearing and understanding, Kevin O'Connell is actually on the hot seat. I think that they're saying if you don't show up and you don't produce with the QB this year, we no longer believe you're the QB whisperer. You're going to be gone.
That's fair. I mean, I don't. I think that as good as O'Connell has looked as a quote unquote QB whisperer, you could still make the argument that he had Kirk Cousins, who's been solid. He brings in Sam Darnold, who picked up quite a bit in San Francisco, and then maybe he was just great all along. Brian Flores is really the heart of this team's success. There's really no disputing that at this point. Um, and the defense, they did lose, Jonathan Grenard, but their defense is still looking solid. I expect them to replicate that this year. So Kyler Murray is the big addition, and apart from Jawan Jennings replacing Jalen Naylor, we still have Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason and fifth round rookie Damon Claiborne, who I was excited about, partially based on skill set coming out of Wake Forest, but also his backfield competition being Jones and Mason, that who I neither of who I'm excited about at all in fantasy this year. Sorry, Aaron Jones and his blow up games. It's just no. Um,
It's wild because Aaron Jones to me, like when I watch him, he still looks really good, and yet he just cannot put it all together for me. And then Jordan Mason, believe me, I was really heavily invested in Jordan Mason. I was very excited for Jordan Mason, and he just doesn't have the talent to make it work. There's just no burst. There's no vision. He's a pure power back playing in a system that doesn't work for him.
yeah, and you can make an argument that things would change, but the offensive line did not get any upgrades. In fact, I think their center retired, and the same offensive system is coming back. So there's not really a room for Mason to prove, even if the offense gets better, which I think it will, possibly significantly. That doesn't really reflect on Mason, I don't think.
I think it's interesting because honestly, a lot of smoke was given about Brian Flores signing as a head coach somewhere else, right? And I do think that that was an option for him. I think he took this massive contract extension because he's already talked with the owners about becoming the next head coach of the Vikings. And tea leaves, guys. I'm making this up, right? This isn't based on reports, okay? So if anyone hears this, like, no one ever said, no one did ever say that. But this is just the way I would read into it. Like, he's like, okay, I'll stay here because if Kevin O'Connell's gone, then I'm the guy.
Yeah, I mean, like players notwithstanding in their talent, notwithstanding in being bad last year, like the only reason they were good was because of Brian Flores.
If
So
you don't remember that Bengals game where the Vikings just came in and kicked the snot out of the Bengals because that defense just dominated them, meanwhile JJ McCarthy can't do a single dang thing, I don't know what you're doing because that proved it more than anything else. Like you cannot just discount this defense. The defense was awesome.
yeah, you can't. And I think that with the offensive upgrades, which I mean, there's nowhere to go but up. But with the offensive upgrades, do you think that Kyler Murray can come in and be fantasy relevant this year?
He can, yeah, sure. I mean, so Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Juwan Jennings, and T.J. Hawkinson. That's a great receiving core. It was last year they didn't do very much because J.J. McCarthy stunk. But if he comes in and he looks like the Kyler of old, or he looks locked in, there's no reason that I would think that he can't produce really high numbers. I am not saying that I buy into Kyler the same way I did in Arizona because it's hard to make that sort of like guess. But Kyler is someone I'm happy to have as a second or maybe even first dart throw QB. One of those players that I'm like, okay, whatever. If he sucks, then he sucks. I move on. But if he doesn't, then holy cow, I've got something here because there is a lot of room for upside in Kyler right now because the Cardinals sucked. It wasn't all on Kyler. The Cardinals were just a bad, poorly managed team. The Vikings are, in theory, better than that. And
I
Kyler, in
think
theory, was better than that.
I'm under the belief, at least based on his play and obviously them benching him. I think Kyler Murray not only hated being an Arizona Cardinal the past 2 years, I think he hated and had really bad chemistry with Jonathan Gannon because obviously, like he did have injuries in there leading up to Gannon's tenure and during Gannon's tenure, but it feels like he just was completely checked out as soon as Gannon came in and that Cardinals team was there. And I would suspect, like Kevin O'Connell being a QB whisperer notwithstanding, I think that Kyler is excited to prove himself. I mean, this is kind of his last chance to prove himself to be a starting QB, no, but like, where he came into the league as, the first overall pick. This is his last chance, and I think he's going to relish that opportunity. And, obviously, like, we're kind of burnt out on Kyler Murray the past few years because in fantasy, he'd risen up to the ranks of that Jalen Hurts, Lamar range of like, fourth, fifth round QB, and he never really proved himself there. But that was because of injuries, and that was because of the Cardinals not having success. So I think that if Kyler comes here and plays with the best weapon of his career in Justin Jefferson, I think there's quite a bit of potential, and I think that like hitting like that Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray QB draft is kind of like where I'm looking at this year, where you
Mm-hmm.
have that like
Mm-hmm.
underrated 10th round QB in Brock Purdy, and then you take Kyler a round or two later. That's nice.
I love it. Here's what I see for Kyler Murray, and this is going to be like purely upside hope. Is that because of one, his skill set, Kevin O'Connell's ability, in theory, again, we have to see it again, but if everything we believed is true, his ability to adapt an offense to the skill of a quarterback and the serious lack of running back depth on this team, or of talent, I should say, even just in general, because if Aaron Jones goes down, you got nobody.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see Kyler Murray playing and running a lot more than he has in the recent years. And I think part of what Jonathan Gannon did to that team was remove the ability for Kyler to run as much, and he gave it all to James Conner, which
Yeah.
awesome for James Conner. That running game did look good at times until he got hurt every season. But if you can give Kyler Murray that ability to run back, and you can say, do your thing with your legs, man, and we need you to do it because we don't have a short running game. It has to be you.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna be gold. That was what made him gold.
Who are you going to trust on the goal line this year? Like if it's Aaron Jones or Kyler Murray? I'm looking at Kyler Murray.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like worst case scenario, you run an RPO and you've got Justin Jefferson or Jawan Jennings, like that's, and I'm ignoring Addison, right, who had a ton of touchdowns 2 years ago, but like both those guys are very, very sure things. I'm gonna ignore last year for Justin Jefferson. I'm just doing that. So like this is a good setup. I really like this setup. I think that Kyler Murray is one of these players that I just, as long as I can get guarantee that he's starting, because JJ McCarthy was so highly invested in that I'm still just a little scared. If Kyler Murray starts though, I believe.
I, I do too. I see no reason why he can't finish at least. And this is with him starting. I see no reason why he can't finish at least in the range of where Sam Darnold did 2 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Uh,
feel like the rushing upside is so there. It just could catapult him.
yeah, and all this to say, like even if JJ McCarthy does usurp him, that means that JJ has built chemistry of Justin Jefferson and actually can lead this team to the playoffs. And all that to say, I think Justin Jefferson is my favorite first round pick this year because he burned people last year. He's not going to go in the top 5, 6, 7, 8 picks this year. I think he could still be late first pretty easily, maybe even mid first. But I think that last year was an anomaly. I don't think Kevin O'Connell is on a scorching hot seat, but I think they need to fix that QB issue. And I think that the number one beneficiary of that is going to be Justin Jefferson.
I also think that Justin Jefferson had a whole lot of heat thrown his way about his drops and about his like. They're like, hey, maybe he's not as good as we think he is. And you've seen Justin Jefferson; he cares about that. He is all about legacy, so he'll take that very seriously and be like, we're fixing this at least so that way they can keep my name out of their mouth, you know.
Yeah, and again, like he was bad last year, not just quarterback play. He was not great last year. He had a lot of drops, but I just there's no way that he just lost it, And similar to the Kyler chemistry, I think that his floor this year is like perhaps what we saw of D Hop and Kyler a few years ago. And obviously, that's not factoring in Kyler's age or injuries, but like just in terms of connection and being the focal point of the offense, I think Jefferson will absolutely return as that wide receiver one. And I just am excited that the recency bias again. People are going to factor that in when they draft him and not want to get burned again. But I have a lot of faith in Kyler. I have a lot of faith, at the very least, in the Vikings doing damage control and not allowing a situation to happen this year wherein Jefferson is having drops and there's no chemistry with the quarterback. Regardless of the quarterback, Jefferson is going to have chemistry with that quarterback. They're going to make that happen. And I just think that we're forgetting about his talent. And I think that if you want to throw him up in that upper echelon of the JSN, Puka, Jamars, Justin Jefferson finishing as wide receiver 1 in fantasy this year would not shock me. So
No,
don't.
I could actually see him sliding to the second, honestly.
Yeah, he could.
And I would love that. For the wide receiver too, I have a clear delineation here.
Hmm.
If Kyler is the QB, I'm into Jordan Addison.
Okay.
If JJ McCarthy is the QB, I am into Jawan Jennings.
Why is that?
So last year we saw
Is it alliteration, the JJ and the JJ?
kind of because we saw Jalen Naylor get hyper targeted by JJ McCarthy over and over again. JJ McCarthy was just willing to target the weakest coverage.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's actually good analysis. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Jawan Jennings is going to get Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson are awesome. They all have J's in their name. It's crazy. They all have JJ and JJ. Anyway, sorry. Okay, mispoint. So, but Jawan Jennings, I've talked about him last year too, and maybe that was much to my mistake. I have faith in his talent. I think that he's a talented wide receiver. If I remember right, this is a 1-year deal. It's a kind of a prove it thing. And I think it
might be a 2 or 3 year deal.
Okay, and I could be wrong about that. I'm just kind of like riffing off right now. So, Jawan Jennings, if it's JJ McCarthy, is going to get peppered with targets because JJ will take the easy route out, and that's not a bad thing. I don't say that to be rude. Taking the easy way out is sometimes really good as a QB, as long as you can also make the hard throws when you need to. And they brought him in because I think they knew that, and they're like, we need someone who's very, very reliable in this role. If JJ McCarthy's the dude.
I agree, and I think that Jawan Jennings, like when we've seen him have great fantasy success, it's been oftentimes in the red zone. And I do like Jordan Addison this year. I think this whole Viking offense, the receiving offense, wide receivers, maybe not Hawkinson, but I think they're being slept on. And I think that Addison could absolutely return value, but I don't see Addison returning to the heights where he was a couple years ago because Jennings, obviously Jefferson, but Jennings is going to vulture a lot of end zone looks. And I think Addison could be, prolific in terms of his volume, but I think that if we're just talking about value, I like Jennings more than Addison this year because Jennings is going to be a little underrated for sure.
Yeah, and for me again, it's like take a look at who the starting QB is: Kyler, Jordan, JJ, Jawan Jennings.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that there's a lot of guesswork here, but I really think that Kyler could take this Vikings offense under Kevin O'Connell to maybe the best we've seen it under him.
They desperately needed someone who could rush for them, and if Kyler's that dude, then my goodness, it's going to be a slam dunk fantasy pick. It's
going to be fun. Hawkinson, I need to see it before I take him. If the value's there, I'll take him, but everyone looked bad last year. He looked especially bad the past couple years.
He does strike me as someone who could be like a Dallas Goedert, like kind of forgotten and left behind, and then it really produces. But he looked like he lost a step. Now, mind you, that whole Vikings offense did. But it's tough for me because I think if he's really forgotten, okay, throw him on your bench, see what happens.
The only thing that gets me excited is his value right now, wherein he's going around tight end 21, which
that's no man's land.
He very well could finish there, and it is no man's land. But if you have faith in this offense like I do, I think you want to take tight ends from good offenses, and he's the one. I would take him over. He's going around the same range as Dalton Schultz, so I'm going to take Hawkinson over Schultz.
Hawkinson definitely has better hair too.
Yeah, he does. Yes. Right on though. But okay, so we're going to wrap up here with the Detroit Lions, who obviously had a down year, finished last in the division, but still went 9-8, and they had rushing yards 14th, passing yards 3rd, points overall 4th. So just an incredible offensive season. They lost Ben Johnson, of course. They had a bit of a dip there, but then once Dan Campbell took over play calling duties, they were right back at their elite status. Now, they did bring in Drew Petzing from the Arizona Cardinals, which
it's a choice.
It's a choice, and it's a mixed bag because as bad as the Cardinals have been, Petzing was partly responsible for that Trey McBride, Michael Wilson superstardom last year. So if we can see a repeat of that with like a Sam Laporta, that's something to look at. Again, they're not one-to-one comparisons, but like maybe Petzing wasn't the issue in Arizona. I mean, if you watch games, sometimes he was because he was calling plays, but in an actual structured offense like the Lions, we'll give them the benefit of a doubt. I hope Dan Campbell has some semblance of authority in play calling, though, if we want to repeat what we saw second half of last year. But still, we have the defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard returning. He was DC last year. They had a lot of injuries. They still produced on defense at times. So I like that pick or that retention. Jared Goff returning, Teddy Bridgewater backing him up. It's really not a whole lot of change. There is one significant change. That's obviously David Montgomery being traded to the Texans. They bring in Isaiah Pacheco, and of course they have Gibbs. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Isaac Tesla, and the newly added Greg Dortch are making up the receiving core. Dortch is not a play style replacement, but he's basically coming in and fulfilling the Khalif Raymond absence.
I love Greg Dortch from what I've seen, especially with Drew Petzing. But like with that said, he can't be fantasy relevant unless there's at least 2 injuries in front of him.
Yeah, he's fun. He'll have like I could see him having a 30-point game this year, but he's also going to have a bucket full of 4-point games.
Now, with that said, like, oops, he becomes Amon-Ra St. Brown Part 2, and he scores a bunch of touchdowns on easy passes. Oh, I'm shocked. Just kidding, I'm not, because he's kind of like that weird underneath player that can do that. But I don't count on it without injuries. I really wouldn't.
If his team didn't have Gibbs, I would say maybe. And if Gibbs and we'll say Jameson Williams get injured, hopefully not for a lot of reasons, then Dortch, there's a role there. But I like him. I like him just as a player. And of course, we have Sam Laporta back. He was injured for most of last year, and Brock Wright didn't really fulfill anything there. They bring in they did bring in the conch monster, Tyler Conklin, which I'm not. I don't know. I have this weird obsession with Tyler Conklin, but
I've had him on my team a lot of times, and every single time I've played him, I've gotten like 9 points.
Yeah, that's he's a solid like 4-point to 9-point range. But he's the conch monster. I don't know. I just have this fixation on him.
I always wonder when I see a player profile picture with a man bun, and then I watch him play with the helmet on. I'm like, does that hurt? It's gotta hurt. I know that's not what's happening, but like my mind goes there.
I like to think that it distracts from the pain the rest of your body is feeling. It's almost a strategy.
I broke my leg, but I couldn't feel it because my hair kept pulling. It's rough.
So there is some changes here with the Lions, but I mean, again, offensively they were still pretty great last year, pretty dang great. Dan Campbell did come out and say that and again this is coach speak, but he did come out and say that he envisions Gibbs to be our, like, I think he said something like monster workhorse, which I love for fantasy. It's hard not to get excited about that. Of course, they lose David Montgomery, and they bring in Isaiah Pacheco, which in my opinion is not a Montgomery replacement. I mean, he is in terms of the roster. He's filling that RB2 role, but he's not similar to Montgomery in terms of play style. And I do believe Campbell when he says that Gibbs is going to be our workhorse, because when he was last year, the Lions won a lot of games.
Yeah, it's so worrisome for me though, because like Isaiah Pacheco is exactly that level of, he has enough notoriety for a GM to bring him in and be like, look, I got you a guy. This is the guy. We got to use this guy. And
Christopher Walken, the GM.
Exactly. And he's like the only similarity between David Montgomery and Isaiah Pacheco is they're both not that fast.
Yeah.
Which isn't really the similarity you want in these players. Pacheco doesn't, I just don't know. He doesn't have that. You're right. He doesn't play the same way. I'm trying to compare them, but they just don't play the same way at all. I don't really, if Jahmyr Gibbs isn't the workhorse RB, I think this running game is going to take a hit overall.
I think a massive hit. And I think that Pacheco is honestly the best replacement for Montgomery because, like you said, he has the name notoriety and he has shown some flashes in the past, but he's not even close to usurping Gibbs as a committee back. So, or, creating a committee back situation. So I really think that, I think Gibbs is going to eat. I think Gibbs is my 101 in fantasy this year. No disrespect to Bijan. I think he's going to be great, but I really have faith in Gibbs just having that unbelievable season. It's it's written in the stars. I think.
It's got to happen at some point. He was my guess for offensive player of the year last year, and that didn't happen. But like one of
I
these years,
consider
this dude is awesome.
Yeah, consider it this year. I think that he'd be my early pick as well. I think that he's the combination of that, elite pass catching back that is also so fast and can break tackles so well. My only hesitation with Gibbs and the Lions as a whole is the offensive line murkiness, wherein their starting left tackle Taylor Decker is gone. Their I forget if he was a center or a guard, but Graham Glasgow retired. He was there for a while. He missed time last year. And they have a lot of young guys. They names are escaping me right now, but they had a couple picks last year that started like third, fifth round rookies at guard. And then they took somebody this year. Again, names escaping me. But so they have young pieces. They basically they replaced their losses, but the replacements are unproven. So there's some murkiness there.
And I do worry a little bit about the vibes of that team because it went from feeling pretty good to David Montgomery kind of blowing the roof off the top of the house. So you went from, okay, we are the team, we are on the rise, we could potentially compete for a Super Bowl, to suddenly feeling like you're really, really out. And I don't think one year of bad records really suggests that in the way.
Yeah,
But man, it feels different.
it does, and I think that the Lions obviously they finished last in the division, so they do have something to prove this year. I think they can prove it, but they still have a chip on their shoulder. I mean, they lost the NFC Championship, um, pretty egregiously, and then they missed the NFC Championship the following year, losing to the Commanders. So there's definitely a chip on their shoulder, and I think that we'll see that most likely come to fruition in the Gibbs X factor. And some defense. I mean, if Aiden Hutchinson's fully healthy this year, which he should be, and they have some pieces, some young defensive line talent that I think could blow up. They gave Jack Campbell, their star linebacker, a big extension, so they have pieces on both sides of the ball to make it happen. And I will ask, so two-part question here: who is your favorite player on this roster in terms of as both a value? Okay, who's your favorite value pick right now, and who do you see as maybe a potential sleeper as a breakout that's not being talked about?
Okay, so I love the idea of Jameson Williams as the post hype. He had the hype last year. He didn't perform to it. He didn't at all. So you can get him way cheaper. And, everyone on this team is on board with Jameson Williams getting better.
Yeah,
There's no one who's not. Everyone wants that to work better, and it would be in their benefit for everyone if it did. So I think with value, maybe sleeper at this point, Jameson Williams, but also there's something about Isaac Tesla, right? And the fact that they traded up for him and he keeps showing off, but he doesn't get a consistent role.
he's missing the targets. That's really all his. I mean, he has the touchdowns. That's for sure. He was just missing the targets last year.
Yeah, and what if they say, okay, so Jameson, that didn't work so great. Let's try out Isaac getting like half your targets. And I know targets are an earned stat, so it's not necessarily just a one for one like that. But Isaac also wasn't on the field nearly as much. So if he starts seeing the field a lot more, and that could make a lot of sense with Khalif Raymond gone, there's a world for me which he becomes a solid wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 flex range sort of player.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know where he's being drafted right now, but I can't imagine it's anywhere even vaguely interesting. Wide receiver 68. So yeah.
He's basically undrafted.
That's a dart throw I'm 100% willing to make, especially in the beginning of the season, just to see what his role is.
Yeah, I agree. I think if he's there, like if he's wide receiver 68, he's worth a dart throw at the very least. Like if you have your draft and then you're like looking at maybe like players on the waivers that you could supplement, he's somebody to target. Maybe look at weeks 1 and 2, or just draft him with your last pick. I think the Lions' offense is most likely going to be prolific again. So I think that having pieces of that offense is important. Um, I do think that Sam Laporta is interesting because he has not really lived up to the hype of his rookie season. But his year two was pretty solid. It just wasn't as good as his rookie season. And last year he was hurt. So I think people are sleeping on him. I think that Sam Laporta is not going to produce at the level perhaps where he was as a rookie, but he very well could because he has before. I don't know how much influence Petzing had on the target share for Trey McBride, but if you're new OC as the former OC of Trey McBride, that's something to at least consider. And I think that in terms of tight end value, like if Sam Laporta is on your team as your tight end, like unless you have Bowers or McBride or one of the big guys, like you're not going to expect to have 18-point weeks every week. But I think Laporta could get you there maybe half the time because I think that he's being undervalued in terms of his injury and just like him being a tight end on a prolific offense. Those are the tight ends that you want. So I think that Laporta is probably my favorite value pick and maybe my sleeper pick as well, just because he's not being talked about as one of the top 10 tight ends. He is being drafted there in some cases, but he's not like being talked about as like one of the top 10 tight ends that could finish in the top 5 because I think he could. I think he could return significant value.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I looking up the ADPs, Jamison Williams is still in like the 4th round.
Fourth
I
round?
I don't love him there. He's 47. I don't love him there at all. So value picks, Laporta makes more sense to me, and then Isaac Tesla because he's going in no man's land, and if he's the wide receiver 3 and has a full-time role of some sort, I could see him earning more targets. But I mean, the hard part with the Lions is that all of these players are going to go relatively early. Like my favorite value pick is Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
But like that doesn't count because he's going in the 1st round already very high.
I think there's something to be said about the consistency there, though. I think Amon-Ra, of course, like probably won't finish as wide receiver 1, but is he worth a 1st round pick? Yes. I think there's nothing that's changed about his talent or this makeup of his team that would suggest he's going to regress this year.
He's that great safe player to pick before you take a risky player in the next round.
Exactly. So I think overall, I think this Lions team has just some absolutely elite pieces, and there's not a lot of sleepers because there's not a lot of big depth on this team because their elite players are so elite that they're not really spreading the ball around a whole lot. But I think having said that, they weren't prolific in terms of rushing last year, but they had Gibbs. But similar to CMC, Gibbs was prolific because of the PPR upside and the amount of receptions he got. And I think that definitely buoys Jared Goff's value for me as well. I think he's an ever very solid like weight on quarterback pick because he throws the ball a lot, even on a team with Jahmyr Gibbs, and he's going to get a lot of touchdowns. So,
my big worry with Jared Goff, and this also goes with Isaiah Pacheco, if you get excited about Isaiah Pacheco, is that this is where the O-line downgrade could come into play. And but it's guesswork, because if that's the case, then also Jamison Williams probably is going to have a hard time because he's the deep ball guy.
For me, it really comes down to the amount of faith you have in trusting the judgment of the coaching staff because, like I said, there's a lot of young guys. It did take Blake Miller in the 1st round to replace Taylor Decker. So like he is young, he's inexperienced, but like can they develop this young O-line talent because they have a lot of it? It just hasn't had to be shown yet. And if they can come out and produce right away, then this could be incredible O-line again. There's just a lot of young talent.
That's fair.
Yep. But yeah, I think that really can't go wrong with the Lions offense in fantasy. And I think we'll talk about it obviously in August, but I think Gibbs is my 101 right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess I'll start this time with my predictions for the NFC West or North breakdown.
Yeah, hit me.
I'm throwing bias out the window here. I think the Lions will finish in first. I think they were just 2 or 3 wins back from the Bears and a lot of close games. I think that their defense will get better. I think their offensive line, young talent will develop. I see the Lions finishing first this year. I'm going to maybe insert my bias here a little bit. I do have a lot of faith in the Vikings defense and the offensive jump, but I'm still going to put the Bears at second because of my faith in Caleb and Ben. But I think the Vikings also could have a really good year. I could see all three of these teams making the playoffs. Um, and I'll be transparent. This is not biased. I don't like the Packers this year. I think, we have the Jacobs possible suspension or all that. They lost a lot of pieces. I mean, Parsons is not going to play the full year. They lost a couple of guys on their O line, including their starting left tackle last year in Rasheed Walker. They have lost Dubes. They've lost Wicks. Um, there's been some defensive exits as well, and I just basically the Packers maybe they saved some money, but they didn't add anybody significant this offseason, and they just lost and lost and lost. So in a close division like this was last year, where they barely got second because they tied a game, I think they could still easily get 8 or 9 wins, but I don't see this being a team that finishes close to the top. I think the Packers are going to be mediocre this year, unbiased, straight up.
No, that's fair. I think we have a different take on the overall, but actually, I have the Packers at the end too. So, um, this is okay. Let's talk about this. The first overall for me, I'm actually going with the Vikings. They were close, right? And that was an offense that was putrid. So I think this offense gets even just a little bit better, and that's all it takes to take them over the top. Second up, I have the Bears because I have faith that Ben Johnson isn't going to let things just fall apart, and I think both of these teams are double-digit win teams. So this isn't a bad season for the Bears. It's just that the Vikings got that much better, and that defense is ridiculous. Third, I've got the Lions, and then fourth, I've got the Packers.
Yeah, I think the NFC North is going to be another great division this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just excited to see if we can get return on I don't know if this happened a couple years ago. It may have, but RB1 and wide receiver 1 from this division, tight end 1 with Colton Love and QB1 of Caleb. There's a lot of elite players.
Here's the opposite end of the spectrum. I could also see the world in which Josh Jacobs not playing for whatever reason, and then Jordan Love gets injured, and you've got 6 games of Tyrod Taylor.
Yeah,
and who's the backup running back right now? I am spacing it, even though we talked about Chris Brooks. Marshawn Lloyd. It really doesn't matter. Whichever one you want. Tyrod Taylor, Marshawn Lloyd, or Chris Brooks. The Packers offense could just turn into a disgusting bag of whatever lunch you hate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I hope so.
I'm trying to think of any of the nasty beers, but I guess I just don't Midwest that much. That's my issue.
I'd rather have a drink in Hammond, Indiana than Green Bay, Wisconsin. And that's not even again, that's not biased. I've been through Green Bay. I ate at the Sonic there. It was okay.
I haven't been to Hammond. I also haven't been to Green Bay. So I'm very unprepared to answer this question. But I have been to Wisconsin, and I don't think I've been to Indiana. So Wisconsin's okay.
Me and my friends, my cousin got pulled over. I don't remember why. I think my friend was speeding in the Upper Peninsula of Wisconsin, and the cop was very nice. He had that Midwest. He sounded very Midwestern. So I'll give Wisconsin that, but that's about it.
I will say the roads in Wisconsin were very slightly better than the ones in Illinois. So,
okay, it's not saying much.
It's really not. And no offense to either of them, those roads are pretty bad. They need to get repainted like every 2 months or something because you can't see any lanes when you're driving through either of these states. They don't exist. The idea of lanes is there, but the actual lanes are just good luck.
I think that we should take the minuscule amount of government funding we have in Indiana's state budget and put it towards a new stadium for Chicago instead. So, save your roads. Yes. Save that for another time.
Don't need it. Hey, you put up toll booths on every single highway that you can ever imagine, and we actually use that money to fund a stadium in a different state.
There you go. Yeah,
see, it's all part of the plan. All part of the plan. Yeah. So hey guys, that was our NFC West, NFC North deep dive breakdown. If you listen to this whole thing for roughly 2.75 hour, you are a sicko, and we appreciate you. We love that sort of sicko. That's the sort of sicko that we end up being. If you listen to the split up episodes, we also appreciate you. A little less sick, but you a little nauseous. It's okay. That's so we
A
can
little
take that
nauseous.
too. Um, be excited for the next season. The next season should be fun. There's a lot of like new open races in every single division, right? Um,
Yeah.
Fantasy, although it's going to have a lot of the same names you see, I think there's going to be a lot of really drastic differences in where they finish. Um, I don't need to tell you this. It's June and you're listening. Doink out.
Doink out.